Put the chat up. Great, I've started recording again. Yeah, so just I think, sorry, I'm just reflecting on this. I think we've got, the issue we have really generally, isn't it, is that I think about us taking individual responsibility or doing stuff personally, like recycling our materials and all that sort of thing. We've got that's important, but actually it is the big organizations and the states that are going to make the biggest difference. There's that sort of argument, and like it's a bit demotivating, isn't it, when we try hard to recycle or buy slow fashion, and we try hard to do these things, and then we see the big organizations or the governments, pressing ahead with fossil fuel exploration and that sort of thing. So there is a lot of sort of tension there. I mean, I suppose it just depends on one's philosophy and one's beliefs really around the personal kind of responsibility, or the, personally, I suppose fundamentally just makes me feel as I'm doing my bit. I do what I can, so I wouldn't feel happy with myself if I was going over the top with consumption or flying or not recycling. If I wasn't doing that, I just wouldn't feel happy with myself, comfortable with myself, I guess. So I guess it comes down to that. Has anyone got any views on that before it's a big question, isn't it? But that thing that you can put in the chat, it's a complicated thing to put in the chat, but that thing, personal responsibility against authority or governance is responsibility. Has anyone got any views on that? You can put in the chat as a simple sort of response. Yeah, it is conditioning, isn't it, in our culture? Amanda's quite right. Consumption is a huge thing. Kids are conditioned to buy it based around, they see what other kids have got, they see advertising, they see what's around them, they want things, and you can understand that with young people, can't you? Youngsters wanting, yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. Beatrix saying finding beauty in the everyday, which I kind of looked at the start of the lecture. Quashing consumerist aesthetics. Yeah. Art has the power to help re-establish individual tastes and encourage people to shop by need and not by trends. Yeah, that's really, really interesting, isn't it? It does. I just think sometimes sorry, I'm a bit negative about the power of art to actually, and what we mean by art, I don't know really, but Beatrix is right. It does have the power, certainly more within design, maybe. I'm not sure that, art is, whatever, I'm getting confusing, but fine art, I'm not sure has much power really. Yeah, Gabriella's saying, I think it's just being aware of what impact the choices we make have, and if there's anything we can do to lessen that. Yeah, that's right. So it is about that every day, in the moment, sort of this choice I'm making, what is the impact? If there's anything we can do to lessen it, let's do it, Yeah, Amanda saying there that the design creators have the skill set, the creative. And I suppose I was like being a bit negative about fine art, those practices like painters and all that sort of thing. But actually, quite often these are the people with quite creative ideas who do end up, influencing bigger things, really. But yeah, design creatives, that's where it's at, I guess, really. And we'll see quite a lot of that in a minute as we move through the lecture. Thanks, everyone. So what about this question? Sorry, this is another question. What in our role as creative practitioners can we practically do to make? Are there anyone got any other idea? I mean, you said quite a lot there. We've had the sort of recycling, we've had the getting the message out there. Are there any other things anyone's thought of? What in our role as creative practitioners can we practically do to make a positive environment? Yeah, Annie, well done. Yeah, dispose of materials appropriately. Absolutely. Recycling materials is a big one. Like I say, I'm always embarrassed in my drawing the amount of paper I waste. And you know, it's a kind of like hurrah for digital practices, isn't it? It's like digital, I think, but you know, someone will probably say that digital, there's a digital footprint, you know, for the environment, especially with the big sort of AI computers and stuff like that. I don't know what the facts are. Data storage is polluting, Amanda. It is, yeah, it is. All those hard drives and disks and metals and all that kind of stuff. It's very true. It is. It's just weighing up the pros and cons, isn't it? Not putting acrylic down the sink. Gosh, yeah. I often put paint down the sink and think, oh, it's all right. It's water based. It's just water, and I don't really know sometimes what's actually in it. Yeah, these things take. I know I've worked in photography a lot, and the disposing of the chemicals now is a huge, massive thing. You know, really carefully regulated, and you can't just put your fixers and your developers down the sink anymore. You have to be really careful what you're doing with it. So yeah, putting nasty stuff into the water system, it's not great. And yeah, I mean, I do know a few artists who are very, very careful about the materials they use, and what's in them to make sure they don't pollute and stuff. Yeah, okay, good ideas. Thank you very, very much. Well done for thinking about that. So let's go on and have a look at some of the things we've talked about these. So yeah, use recycled materials. Sort of thing. Beatrix has just said an interesting one. Workshop leaders, sourcing sustainable materials, hosting shows in community centres. Great. This is a big one. Showing value for our local spaces protects the buildings and stops developers breaking them down. Excellent, Beatrix. Yeah, really like that. Really, really good one. We'll come on to that one in a minute. But the community thing is huge. You know, it's not an obvious sustainability environment, but it's really, really effective and really important. So yeah, use recycled materials. We've come across that one, and be aware of the materials life cycles. And this is the slow fashion thing, isn't it? So using materials that aren't harmful to the environment, last a long time, don't degrade. And here we've got, this is a life cycle assessment. So the raw material extraction, where are we getting it from? Where's it coming from? What happens during the manufacturing process? How is it transported? And then the use and what happens at the end of the life. So 1, 2, 3, 5 stages there in the life cycle that we can think about. So we might think about, you know, raw material extraction being something like, I don't know, cotton. And then what happens to that in the manufacturing process, transporting that, it's quite light, I guess. If we keep it local, that's cutting that down. If it's good quality cotton, we can use it quite a lot and it shouldn't break down too much. In the end of the life, it can be recycled because it's a natural product. So something like that's fine. Whereas if we think of things like, you know, precious metals, it's far more complicated, isn't it? What's going on here? Or sort of like materials which are messed around with or like affected or got to mix with other things, become far more, it's a lot more process going on. It's far more difficult to do something positive with them at the end of their life. So that life cycle is definitely something that people in the design world will look at when looking at costs and environmental friendliness. Minimize data. There we go. So as we've just said, Amanda suggested data storage is polluting. Streaming just an hour of video per week requires more energy use than 2 domestic refrigerators. Blimey. Where is that energy coming from? In many countries, it's by burning coal. So, yeah, sort of streaming long videos, watching them on big screens is using loads of energy, and that's generally coming from burning of the fossil fuels. So we're caught up in that cycle there. Use ethical suppliers. So this is, we've touched upon this before. But yeah, check your suppliers, ensure that all the suppliers you use have a lower impact. And there's the fair trade symbol, which is quite well known now, quite in common use. Well worth looking for when buying products, often with foods and drinks rather than art products, I think. Design better defaults, and this is a good, for example, instead of takeaway food delivery coming with disposable napkins and cutlery, the designers behind food delivery platforms could force users to choose to add them. I think things are better than they were here, but the number of times that you get some fast food and that with it is like your napkins, your forks, your, I don't know, and you end up just throwing them away, not using them. Whereas I think to go out and, I mean, you know, to get them, to source them, to choose them rather than be giving them as a default it's kind of quite a subtle one, but I think it's quite an important one. And a couple of you have mentioned this, so get the issues out there. Artisan designers have a responsibility and the skills to present environmental issues in a compelling way for maximum impact. This is the really great Save the Arctic poster, Mario Gatti. Really simple color, really simple graphics. Wonderful little illustration there of the white hand holding the polar bear up, suggesting that we can save polar bears. If we do our thing, we can actually make a difference. So yeah, within graphic design, advertising, there's a huge responsibility, I think. Be aware of the issues. I think this is kind of one of the reasons I put in that early piece about the main factors that are a problem for us. Be aware of the environmental issues. If we're aware of the issues and the facts, that your work's going to be taken more seriously. Important there are no lies or exaggerations, because this can have a negative effect. So once you're kind of that's why I was a bit worried about some of my facts earlier, because I think some of them weren't quite accurate. But once you start to not say, right, you know, get fact check, say, hold on a minute, you're over, you know, you're really exaggerating that fact, and that's not good. So yeah, make sure you know all your facts. So here, climate risk 1.5 versus 2. So this is like the two. What happens between the 1.5% rise and the 2% rise, and it's got the facts here showing it. So you've got to check that that's right. Know your stuff, I suppose. Know your stuff. Work with others. This is what Beatrix was saying. Really, really good point. Collaborative projects are much more likely to be enjoyable and successful than working alone. More open studio spaces with a range of practitioners are a good example. So kind of you're sharing printers, you're sharing kettles or whatever, you're sharing everything, you're sharing ideas. You've got a lovely community, kind of working studio space where you're, you know, think good things, interesting, creative things are going on, rather than it being knocked down and built for something that's a bit more profitable for developers. So generally, all good, all good. Educate others as well. So art education is a big place in promoting sustainability through public and community education projects and workshops. So this one here is an example of a workshop there, probably using some sustainable materials, working around the environment, bringing people together. Definitely a an area that creative people get involved in to, boost communities' awareness of issues and get people work together, enjoying themselves. Again, not an obvious sort of like, oh, this is great for the planet, but it's just part of the bigger package that creative practices can offer, I suppose. Okay, we'll look at some fine artists. I'm a bit down on the fine artists with this in this field, but I think we can see here that there's some great work and great messages made. But I just feel sometimes the audience is a little bit small and a little bit privileged, and so I love it, but I'm not sure whether it can make a huge lovely, some of these projects conceptually. I mean, really great. Mural ukuleles. This is touch sanitation, which has been going on a long time. 1979 it started. So she blurs the lines between art and everyday life. This is her project, Touch Sanitation, and involves shaking hands with 8,500 sanitation workers in New York City, bringing attention to the often overlooked labor involved in waste management. So it's a great message, isn't it? Just often sanitation workers are seen as sort of like people you don't mix with, lower class jobs, and but here she is sort of really bigging them up, giving them, showing them as part of the community, being friendly. They're so important in the environment and sustainability futures. Really, really wonderful project. And of course, they're so heavily involved in recycling. Any recycling projects have to involve the sanitation workers in the big cities. And we've come across Olafur Eliasson's. I never know how to say it. Olafur Eliasson's The Weather Project, amongst others. This is in the Tate. Impressive installation. Draws attention to the fundamental of receiving the wonderful world around us. But like the weather, our perceptions are in a continual state of flux. The Weather Project, there were these lovely dynamic variations, parallel the unpredictability of the weather outside, which despite the efforts and sabotage still remains of humankind, still remains beyond our control. So I think, what a great project, what a great message, really. Just the weather, God, it's such a sort of indicator of change, isn't it? I mean, it's a subtle thing, but just in the last 2 weeks here in southern England, it's just been grey. It's just been like grey cloud, light grey cloud, no wind, no sun, no rain. It's just this grey sort of, and it just feels really strange. I don't remember a time that's quite so sort of like settled and still as this. And it seems to be going on still for the next few days. But anyway, but yeah, just very, very tuned. And this is part of that, that sun. This is a vital part for us as a planet. And this is the running table, Dan Peterman's. And this is quite interesting because I showed you earlier Anish Kapoor's big metal thing here. Here it is in the background. But this is Dan Peterman's running table, which was put up next to it. Inspires interaction. The table invites strangers from walks of life to congregate as they eat. So people are sitting around having picnics, having their lunch. It's crafted from recycled plastic, 2 million milk jugs, in a space often defined by city-sponsored fairs and tourism. Comments on the waste produced during such events and American society in general. So it directly plays off the Kapoor, I think. But there's also a place to look at the Kapoor and look at the reflections and stuff. So it gives it a, it's fantastic. It's such a well thought through piece of work, but so simple. Yeah, lovely. The Ninth Wave, Seiku Guang, Kaigu Kwang, maybe the Ninth Wave from 2014. Set sail to the Ninth Wave. This is a fishing boat from the artist's hometown of Guangzhou, carrying 99 fabricated animals. Here it is sailing along the famous Bund on the Huangpu River, Shanghai. Yeah. Tigers, pandas, camels, and apes cling to the worn ship, looking weather-beaten and sullen with their heads bowed in fatigue. So you've got these animals on here. These fabricators are all looking really downtrodden, like an ark. And it's a very, very sad sculptural piece, but really brilliant, really, really clever. You know, for me, it really hits home, you know, about the issues that face us, the environmental problems ahead really does hit home. But I just think getting the audience for these things is quite difficult. As I've said many times, I suppose one of our roles also is to recycle it, you know, as artists, creative people, to see these things and then put them on our Instagrams or our social media sites so that lots of other people see them, and then there's a sort of knock-on effect. I guess that's something we can do to increase the audience for them. But it's a beautiful piece of work. Batinsky, photographer, uses high vantage points, focusing on places, sites of environmental change or decay. So quarries, mines, trash piles, deforestation, pictures of depletion and desecration, testament to the collective impact of humankind. I mean, the thing about British, they're not depressing pictures because they're often very painterly and fine detailed. These huge, gargantuan human processes, industrial problems. It's very beautiful, isn't it? This red river going through the landscape, but this is like nickel tailing. So this is a nickel mines. So yeah, it's not great. And that idea of the red blood, but it's very beautiful. So it sort of draws us in, makes us think about what's going on. Yeah, that's Batinsky. Chew Green Fort. This was quite an interesting sculpture from quite a few years ago now. But it's called 1 kilo pet. So it's making reference to this idea that a kilogram of pet plastic, which is here, requires lots and lots of products and consumption to make it happen. 17 kilograms of water, 25 grams of sulfur oxides, 18 grams of monoxide, 20 grams is air emissions of hydrocarbons. In terms of water use alone, much more is consumed in making the bottles than will ever go into them. So yeah, more water's consumed in the making than actually goes into them. So, you know, it's a sculpture in a gallery. Obviously, it presumably will have text with it to kind of explain this. Otherwise, it's not going to hit its audience at all. And this is a really well-known piece. This was 82, so this is going back a while. You know, we're talking 42 years ago. Quite an important environmental piece from Agnes Danes. So 82, 2-acre wheat field was planted on a landfill in Lower Manhattan, 2 blocks from the Wall Street and the World Trade Center and the Statue of Liberty. 200 truckloads of dirt were brought in, and 285 furrows were dug by hand and cleared of rocks and garbage. The seeds were sown by hand and the furrows covered with soil. Maintained for 4 months, cleared of wheat smut, weeded, fertilized, and sprayed against mildew fungus. Irrigation system set up. The crop was harvested on August the 16th and yielded over 1,000 pounds of healthy wheat. So it's a little spring-summer cycle of turning this area into a field for wheat. And this is the photographic documentation of it. How important the photography is, isn't it, in terms of recording these things? Because without it, it would be lost. Yeah. But yeah, this is a famous environmental project, really good one. Okay, this is Chris Jordan's Midway Message from the Gaia. This is a Midway Atoll, cluster of islands, 2,000 miles from the nearest continent. Detritus of our mass consumption surfaces in an astonishing place inside the stomachs of dead baby albatrosses. The nesting chicks are fed lethal quantities of plastic by their parents, who mistake the floating trash for food as they forage over the vast polluted. I mean, this is quite a upsetting project. And, you know, I'm sorry if this is quite upsetting. Every time I see it, I feel quite upset. And we're going to see, I've got a video of Chris Jordan talking a little bit about it. So yeah, apologies, but sometimes we need to look at this stuff, I guess. So here's Chris Jordan talking about the project.
Incredibly heartbreaking and symbolic tragedy that's happening out there. Where it's fly out over the vast polluted Pacific, collecting plastic. They think they're collecting food to bring back to their babies. What they actually are filling their stomach up with is our cigarette lighters and bottle caps and toothbrushes and so on. And they come back and they feed these things to their babies. And the babies literally fill up with plastic until they die of dehydration, starvation, punctures to their stomach. And so the ground on Midway Island is covered with the bodies of tens of thousands of baby albatrosses that have died in this kind of horrendous way. And I think it's a symbolic place that I really want to kind of bring this tragedy out visually, because this is where the Pacific garbage patch surfaces. The Pacific.
Yeah, again, so yeah, it's quite upsetting piece of work. I mean, has anyone got any thoughts on this? Because again, it's incredibly upsetting, isn't it? And you get the feeling that if people see this, surely they're going to think, hold on a minute, something needs to be done. This is all going wrong, you know. Because again, it's quite a marginal project. I'm not sure how many people will have seen it. Anyone got any ideas how these sort of projects can make more impact, I suppose, get a greater audience? Anyone got any thoughts on that? No one's got any. Yeah, okay. So that Charlotte's got quite an interesting idea there, that, you know, the big organizations or companies hire artists to create a piece, you know, because this is an artist creating a piece through the impact of the arts they know. Yeah. It boosts the company. It does boost the company, but it's not affecting. Yeah, they're not supporting it in their projects, so they're kind of making something that complements and does their products good, I suppose. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, Khadijah's just sort of saying less pollution generally on the sea and the wild, less animals have to suffer. Yeah, it does go back to sort of publicizing the idea of keep the pollution down. Yeah, makeup brand showing it with a sustainable packaging line. Yeah, that's good. So yeah, it's just about using the audiences they've got. Yeah, Yeah, Amanda's saying people are bombarded with images all the time. Won't make much of a difference to human behavior. However, if it was a human body, yeah, you're probably right. That would have much more impact, wouldn't it? So, yeah, so I think that's interesting. Amanda's sort of saying that there's image fatigue, I suppose, compassion fatigue, so many images through all sorts of sources now. Yeah, yeah, it's often too extreme. God, that's interesting what Beatrix is saying. So, lots of, yeah, the population generally have enough going on, fighting for their own individual cause. It doesn't always create much incentive to act. Yeah, it's often too extreme. Yeah, yeah, interesting stuff, everyone. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So more gentle, Beatrix saying hope is what propels people. Yeah. Yes, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? You need some hope. We need some sort of stats to come out that says, yes, in this continent, they have done this. And look, emissions, CO2 emissions are down and the stopping rising, So, yeah, um, that's important. Anyway, back to the artwork. So this is Susan Stockwell's Flood 2010. So this is dissected computers, innards exposed, revealing the underbelly of the machines we take for granted, an autopsy of our consumer society. So the computer's the machine, here put into a sort of pillar into this church setting. So it's kind of like falling down from the heavens. And so the religious theme is quite important here, isn't it, in terms of the site for it. Amanda's suggested a book by Hannah Ritchie called Not the End of the World, which is very interesting. I'll have to have a look at that. That sounds as though it could be something positive for us. Thanks very much, Amanda. So Susan Stockwell's piece, yeah, really interesting. The Websters from 2000, this is a piece called Wasted Youth. And, again, a really strong, simple statement about, a young person here, the light shining through all this garbage, leaving this lovely shadow of a young people lying down, looking up. So a really lovely, simple, strong statement that kind of brings a lot of stuff together and makes the point, But again, it'll be in an art gallery. It'll be seen by probably the converted, and but it's great idea. Tara Donovan's piece. She says this is called Styrofoam Cups Untitled. Very beautiful, hanging from the ceiling. She says there's nothing particularly special about everyday materials. I was drawn to them because they are easily accessible, inexpensive, and mass produced. I work to a point where the material transcends itself. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, this is a very beautiful piece of work. I'm not sure if when we look at it, we're immediately thinking, styrofoam cups, they're terrible. We can't use them anymore. It's coming at it quite in a bleak sort of way, but great to recycle them and use them for a lovely piece of work. This is Maya Lin's What is Missing, which is quite fun. This is like a megaphone to listen to the earth. It's quite the small end of the cone. At the end of the cone here, it's kind of focusing in on a small bit of the garden, really, where loads of interesting stuff goes on environmentally, ecologically. And basically, she's sort of like the megaphone is giving it a voice. You look down in, and the sounds are increased, and it's more sort of like heightened, the visuals at the end. So again, a really lovely, nice, simple idea. Very effective. And this is fantastic. This is Agnes Brand. This is the Moon Goose analog. So she really is on the the poetry, art, science area. She weaves fact, imagination, storytelling, and myth. So she developed this narrative based on Godwin's The Man in the Moon, which the protagonist flies to the moon in a chariot towed by moon geese. She's actualized this concept by raising 11 moon geese. Here they are, with astronauts' names, and imprinting them on herself as a goose mother. They live in a remote moon analog area. So she's like training these geese to help her fly off to the moon. So it's a very beautiful, poetic piece. Works on lots of different lovely levels. And Thomas Saraceno, multimedia artist, works across all sorts of disciplines, often to do with ecosystems. A lot of his work is about spiders, so research into spiders as sources of inspiration, webs, their behaviors, myths, relationships. Here's Biospheres, which is the original piece, I think, which is all about these webs and spiders, sort of links. And then this is a piece at the Serpentine, Hyde Park, 2023, called Species of Spaces. So yeah, quite dramatic sculptural pieces. Marina Zerkow, really like her work. It's great. This is a piece called Can the Substrate Speak? She works with media, animation, video, all sorts of things. Includes narratives around environmental concerns, reflections on the relationship between species or between humans, animals, plants, and the weather. So again, it's like one of those lovely, simple graphic poster campaigns. Can the substrate speak? You know, the substrate being the soil, what goes on beyond the soil, which is completely pivotal and vital to our environmental sustainability. She's just questioning, can it speak? No, it can't. It can't tell us what the heck's going on there. Hasn't a voice as such. But we need to give it a voice because it's the thing that supports us. So this is interesting. We took that thing I've been talking about. This is Chu Greenfort again, saying, answering that question: can working creatively with environmental context really change things? Wouldn't it be better to rely on the actions of the eco-activists? So this is that thing about, can artists really do anything? And she says, quite interesting, art and design has the ability to elaborate and open up discourses without being labelled and categorised as this or that political faction, which is quite interesting. So it can draw on a more complex system of references and interdisciplinarity than a purely politically defined activity. This ability to be an open system makes it interesting to work with. So she's basically saying, and I think there was a reference in the chat, maybe Beatrix said earlier, there's so much information out there that, you know, and it's polarized quite often, the political debate. Whereas there's as with art generally, there's a more complex system that can open up and give a different message rather than that kind of scientific or political one. Yeah, interesting. Spoiler alert. Yeah, so just coming back to some of the earlier things we talked about, there are some dubious practices, you know, within advertising and design, which we need to be aware of. And you might have come across the idea of greenwashing. Okay. And that is, here's an example. So how to spot greenwashing. So vague, green sounding language, irrelevant claims, badly thought out big gestures, misleading numbers and percentages, rebranding to include natural packaging, making the product packaging green. Greenwashing is all about misdirections. So greenwashing is companies who use the environmental and sustainable issue to sell products or to promote their products, when actually it's rubbish. They're talking a load of rubbish. And one of the biggest ones was the Ryanair one here. Ryanair line saying has the lowest carbon emissions of any major airline. Committed to cutting our carbon emissions further. Say, and all this was fact checked, all of it, and it was all absolute nonsense. So the advert had to be taken down because none of it was true. But they decided they'd just give it a go, put it out there, and hope that no one noticed. But so greenwashing. So advertisers trying. Ryanair said it's Europe's lowest emissions airline. The claim was more or less made up. The Advertising Standards Authority promptly banned the advertisements. Reminder that environmentally sensitive sectors like aviation, you need to be extra careful as brands are all too eager to promote their green credentials to win more customers. Often the claims just aren't true. It's not just aviation. You'll find it in all sorts of advertising campaigns. So be careful of greenwashing. But, we do have companies like Patagonia, which very, very carefully construct a huge environmental presence, and it's generally pretty correct and true, and they don't make any false claims. So good on Patagonia. And this was we're going back a bit again, 13 years ago. Don't buy this jacket campaign. It's like everyone was like, what? Telling us not to buy your jacket. Why would they discourage people from purchasing their own products? The answer lies they have a genuine commitment to sustainability and desire to promote conscious consumerism. They're encouraging customers to think twice before making a purchase. The campaign aimed to create a shift in consumer mindset and highlight the importance of making thoughtful choices. Part of the advert here, Patagonia surf trunks. 17-year-olds surf trunks still looking good. So they have this common threads initiative. We make useful gear that lasts a long time. You don't buy what you don't need. Repair. We help you repair. Your pledge to fix what's broken. Reuse. We help to find a home for Patagonia gear. Look at this. You can pass it back to them. They'll find a home for it to recycle it. They'll repair it. Again, you could be cynical and say, look, they're making loads of money out of the products, but, it's probably the best example we're going to find, So let's just look at what Charlotte's put up, which is quite interesting. So relating to this, the statistic, today's fashion, there's a stat that we have enough clothes to clothe the next 3 generations, but it's going to landfill as well. And there's a few videos on YouTube by graphic designers designing food packaging of bad and natural food to make it seem healthy. Yeah, that's exactly right. So you've got that, again, a contradiction there, haven't you? Great packaging, it's recyclable packaging, fantastic, but food, which is like really manufacturing process, is terrible for the environment. So it's a really difficult one. Anyway, good old Patagonia. They're still up there as but expensive. My God, this stuff is expensive. But maybe you just need to buy one every 15 years rather than one every 5. So maybe it's worth it. But just to finish off the lecture, it's probably within the design field where the most immediate and sustaining impact can be made. And this, for example, again, with architecture, this is Kempagoda International Airport, which is in Bengaluru in southern India. It's a bamboo structure. So this is a facility that can handle 25 million visitors, but it's also rooted in nature and sustainable architecture, rich in interior planting, lush exterior, natural materials such as brick and bamboo. So Bengaluru, actually, in southern India, is trying to set itself up as this sort of sustainable city. And good on it. I don't know what the current, this is a couple of years ago, I don't know what the current situation is in Bengaluru, but I think they were pretty go ahead in terms of sustainability all round, really. A really good reputation. So a lot of this is the Allbirds sneaker net zero carbon shoe, woolly sock style trainer, bioplastic sole that effectively adds zero emissions to the atmosphere over the course of its life. The minimal all grey moonshot features an upper made using wool from a regenerative farm in New Zealand, which uses sustainable land management practices, etc. So that's really good. And supposedly there's an on-farm carbon storage offset, which offset any other emissions generated over the product's lifestyle, making it the world's first net zero carbon shoe. So yeah, again, this is a fact check thing. Is it greenwashing? I think generally it's kind of all right. The facts are kind of checked, and it's kind of like it is indeed. So this is, but again, very expensive. But yeah, interesting. And then the Polestar electric vehicle 2023. There's a new one, isn't there? Polestar 3 now. Built from sustainable materials, interior made from textiles and plastics, delivered from recycled materials, low carbon footprint, regenerative braking system, which electric vehicles have generally. So it's something more about electric vehicles, although they've got their issues, of course they have. But carbon emissions are much less in terms of the running of them. We know that, not necessarily the making of them, but Polestar is trying to deal with that. Vadim Kibarin's paper chairs. So furniture normally is like bad wood or bad materials, metals. So, a lot of waste. When we see products made from anything else, it leaves us in awe. These are wonderful furniture designed from paper, made solid through glues and stuff, I guess. But they're this kind of designer chairs. They're not for mass production, I don't think, yet. But that could presumably follow. And obviously AI could prove a real bonus in this area. So here's an AI generated images made by Manus Bhatia, which is a future cities project. AI generated images explore the possibility of sustainable infrastructure following the rapid global rise in urbanization. So with the help of AI, the architect imagines a sustainable utopian city of the future, towering skyscrapers, algae facades. The green structures offer lots of benefits, reducing carbon emissions and minimizing the use of artificial cooling. God, it looks great, doesn't it? I mean, whether these sorts of things are realistic in terms of cost and whether they'll happen, but I'm pretty sure AI is going to be a really useful tool in helping designers and architects move forward with some of their ideas. And this is in the newspaper this week, actually. ASICS, who are a big sort of fast fashion group, I suppose you might say, have just released the Neo Curve, made from discarded shoes, so recycled ASICS shoes. Old ASICS shoes recycled and made into new ones. This is the Neo Curve sneaker. Big advertising campaign at the moment with this headline, "Not Total Rubbish." Great. Yeah, so a lot of initiatives going on in the world of design, becoming fairly embedded in sort of lawmaking and regulations in some countries. Obviously, there's some countries now kind of not following through on that, which is a worry. But yeah, there's some positive moves, and we all got our part to play in that, I guess. Great. Okay, so lots of stuff covered there. I hope that's given us all something to think about. Thank you so much for your valuable contributions. Always good to have you chatting there, and your really good ideas in the chat. I hope that's will feed into your own practices and thoughts for the future in a positive way. Okay, right. See you in 2 weeks then. Thank you very much. Have a good couple of weeks. Best wishes to you all. Bye. Thanks all. Thanks, Annie. Thanks, Beatrix. Thanks, Khadija. Stop the recording. See you in 2 weeks.